Episode 1. You were overlooked on purpose. Because heaven was preserving you, you watched others go ahead. Be chosen. Be celebrated. Be called the one. You sat in the back row, clapped for their rise, wondered if heaven ever saw you the same way. And you told yourself, maybe I'm just not ready. Maybe I'm not enough. But here's what no one told you. You weren't overlooked. You were preserved. Preserved for a time when fire would burn too hot for the superficial to survive. Preserved for an hour when noise would fade and only weight would still stand. Preserved like a seed, hidden underground, not forgotten, but a sign to rise later. When the stage gets quiet, when the storm exposes what was never real, you weren't delayed. You were defended, shielded from movements that would have devoured your softness, protected from titles that would have outpaced your character, kept in the dark, so your roots could go deeper than applause ever could. And now the hour has come where survival isn't enough. Now is the hour of the remnant, the ones who didn't build platforms, but became altars, the ones who didn't beg to be seen, but were willing to be buried until fruit could form, the ones who didn't just preach light, they carried it through caves no one posted about. You are the remnant, and you were preserved so that when the house cracked, you could be the frame that didn't move, so that when false fire faded, your flame would still be burning true. You weren't overlooked. You were trusted with silence, trusted with time, trusted with terrain. No one else was willing to walk long enough to master. And now you carry something they can't download, can't manufacture, can't perform. You carry survival that became strategy. You carry depth that didn't come from position, but from presence. They called it delay. Heaven called it deep work. They called it small. God called it safe. They thought they passed you by, but you were hidden in plain sight until it was safe to rise. This is your hour, not to catch up, but to step in, not to prove, but to pour, not to chase, but to carry. Because the remnant doesn't come to impress the room. The remnant comes to rebuild the ruins. You weren't overlooked. You were preserved for right now. And now that the shaking has begun, you are still standing. Episode 2. You're not left behind. You're set apart for the aftermath. It looked like everyone else was moving forward, stepping into promise, receiving reward, advancing. And you were still there, still hidden, still waiting, still wondering if the door was ever meant to open for you. But what you didn't see was the wisdom of heaven. You weren't being delayed. You were being set apart for the aftermath. Because when the storm hits, not everyone survives it. When systems crumble, platforms fall, and false fires die out, there must be a remnant ready to step in, not to rebuild what was, but to restore what matters. You are that remnant, and you weren't preserved for the parade. You were preserved for the quiet work of holding what is sacred. When the music stops, you weren't meant to go first. You were meant to go deep, and deep things take time. Now you carry something different, not hype, not brand, but healing, the kind of healing that doesn't come with microphones, but with ministry of presence, the kind of leadership that doesn't come with spotlight, but with a basin and a towel, because the aftermath is not impressed with charisma. The aftermath needs clarity, needs compassion, needs leaders who know how to sit in silence and not flinch, who know how to hold the broken without needing to fix them, who know how to discern God, even when the dust hasn't settled. You were not left behind. You were held back so your heart could be prepared for what comes after the shaking. And now that the shaking has come, you're not shocked. You're ready. You're not afraid of silence. You were raised in it. You're not intimidated by collapse. You watch your own life burn and rebuild enough times to know what resurrection feels like. They moved fast. You moved true. They built momentum. You built depth. And now heaven says, release what you've been carrying. The moment has arrived. You're not behind. You're on time. For the healing after the chaos. You are the hands that bind what's bleeding. The whisper that brings the weary home. The structure that steadies a people. Still shaking. You're not left behind. You're set apart for the aftermath. And the aftermath has never needed hype. Only hope. And you carry it. Episode 3. You were hidden so you could be holy, not just helpful. You wondered why. No door opened. Why your name wasn't called. Why you were skipped over. In the line of the qualified. The prepared. The ones who looked ready. You asked, God, I have something to give. Why keep me silent? But what you didn't know, you weren't hidden because you weren't useful. You were hidden so you could become holy. Heaven wasn't trying to delay your impact. It was protecting your purity. You weren't being trained to be effective. You were being consecrated to be clean because the world is full of helpful people. But what the aftermath needs is holy people. People who don't move from pressure, but from presence. People who don't speak from impulse, but from intimacy. People who don't serve to be seen, but to host God in secret. You were hidden because he wanted to form you, not just use you. He wanted your oil to be pure, not marketable. He wanted your eyes to be clear, not influenced. He wanted your hands to tremble with reverence, not to perform with speed. This wasn't punishment. It was preparation. This wasn't rejection. It was refinement. You weren't being passed by. You were being passed through fire. So when the time came, what you carried would not burn out, because being helpful can open doors, but only holiness can carry glory. And you were made for glory, the kind that doesn't just shift rooms, but builds temples, the kind that doesn't entertain crowds, but draws heaven down. So he hid you, not because you weren't ready to serve, but because you were called to host. And a host must first become a sanctuary. They wanted you to move fast. Heaven asked you to be still. They wanted you to produce. Heaven asked you to purify. They wanted your help. But heaven wanted your holiness. And now the time is turning. Not because you became useful, but because you became undivided. Your yes is clean. Your hands are steady. Your heart isn't performing anymore. It's protecting the flame. You weren't hidden to stay hidden. You were hidden so that when you emerged, you wouldn't bring more noise. You'd bring the sacred. And in a world craving help, you'd carry what's holy. Episode 4. You were not preserved for popularity. You were preserved for purity. You saw the lights. You heard the noise. You watched others rise. Fast, loud, applauded. And part of you wondered, did I miss it? Was I too hidden, too quiet, too simple to be used? But what you didn't realize was this. He didn't preserve you to make you popular. He preserved you to keep you pure. Because popularity can bring reach, but purity brings weight. And when heaven looks to shift history, it doesn't reach for the most followed. It reaches for the most faithful. You weren't set aside because you lack charisma. You were set aside because you carried something too holy to be handled carelessly. Others were released early because they could afford to be. You were sealed, not hidden in shame, but hidden in mercy, kept from stages that would have split your soul, kept from platforms that would have praised your gift and starved your spirit. You were never forgotten. You were guarded. He didn't say no. He said, not yet. I'm keeping her clean because popularity costs less. Purity costs everything, and you've paid the price in silence, in surrender, in seasons where no one clapped, but angels stood still in awe of how you stayed faithful. When no one was watching, they built presence. You built consecration. They built followings. You built foundations. And now, when the noise starts to fall apart, your voice will remain, not because it's louder, but because it's clearer, not because it entertains, but because it pierces, not because it's trendy, but because it's true. Heaven didn't preserve you to make you visible. He preserved you to make you holy. And holiness never moves fast, but it always lasts. You're not entering now because you finally got it right. You're entering because you finally stopped trying to be seen and started becoming safe. Safe for the wait, safe for the people, safe for the kind of presence that doesn't come when we're performing. You were not preserved for popularity. You were preserved for purity. And purity still has a place in the story heaven is writing. Episode 5. You're not the leftovers. You're the ones that last. They didn't choose you. They didn't clap for you. They didn't call you up when they were naming who mattered. And part of you wondered, maybe I'm just what's left. Maybe I missed my moment. But let heaven set the record straight. You're not the leftovers. You're the ones that last. You weren't meant to flash across the scene. You were meant to withstand the storm. You weren't built for trend. You were built for truth. And truth doesn't shout. It stays. You've outlasted what was popular. You've survived what was polished. You've stayed standing while the glitter faded and the noise turned to dust. Because you were never part of the hype. You were part of the harvest. You were made for the day, after the smoke clears, for the moment when the crowd is gone and hearts start asking what was real. And there you are, not shaken, not bitter, not burnt out, but present, still burning, still believing, still here. You're not the leftovers. You're the root system beneath what looked dead, but wasn't. You're the oil that didn't run out when every other lamp grew dim. You're the well that didn't dry when the rain stopped falling. Others were loud. You were anchored. Others moved fast. You moved deep. And now it's the depth that's needed. Not performance, but presence. Not noise, but weight. Not relevance, but resilience. You were not left out. You were let remain. Because when God clears the field, he leaves the ones he can build upon. And you're still standing. Because you were always meant to. You're not here to echo what was. You're here to establish what comes next. You're not a spare part. You're a foundation stone. So let them call you forgotten. Let them overlook your name. Heaven calls you reliable. Heaven calls you still burning. Heaven calls you remnant. You're not the leftovers. You're the ones that last. And in a world where everything fades, you are proof that heaven still plants people who don't move when the winds change. Episode 6. You don't sound like the others because you're not from where they stopped. You're from where they broke. You've heard it before. You're different. Your tone feels heavier. Your words, they hit something. And you smiled. But inside you knew why. It's not because you're more gifted, or more trained, or more anointed. It's because you're not speaking from where they stopped. You're speaking from where they broke, and lived, and stayed long enough to be rebuilt by God, not by ego. They sound clean. You sound cut open. They speak in points. You speak in prayers you never meant to say out loud. They teach from books. You bleed from memory. Because you didn't just survive the fire. You learned to walk inside it, to talk from within it, to carry glory not on your clothes, but in your bones. You sound like ache that turned into oil. You sound like silence that taught you how to hear again. You sound like someone who didn't run when the cave closed in, but stayed until the stone rolled back. You don't sound like others because you don't stand where they stood. You speak from a deeper descent, from a wilderness where your voice was crushed until all that was left was truth. You don't echo trends. You echo resurrection. And resurrection has a tone that can't be faked, a weight that can't be imitated, a crack in every syllable, not from weakness, but from having walked through death with God and come out breathing. You didn't come to impress. You came to interrupt, to stop the cycle, to break the show, to whisper a word that sounds like home, to souls that forgot how to feel. You don't sound like others because you didn't train in the same places. You were forged where systems had no map, where teachers had no language, where heaven whispered in the rubble, and you listened. So Yes, your voice might be heavier, might feel slower, might cut a little deeper, but it's not weight from pride. It's weight from presence. You were not made to echo halls. You were made to unclog altars, to shake sleepers, to speak to tombs, to carry words that smell like earth, but ignite like thunder. You don't sound like them, because you didn't stop where they stopped. You broke, and God rebuilt you to carry something. That doesn't sound like strategy. It sounds like surrender. And when the dust settles, yours will be the voice. They remember not for its volume, but for its veracity, not for its trend, but for its truth. Episode 7. You weren't called to look healed. You were called to heal others from the place you still limp. There was a time you thought you had to be whole, to be useful, that if you still limped, if you still cried, still bled, still prayed prayers that ended in silence, then maybe you weren't ready. But here's the truth. He's been whispering in your shadow. You weren't called to look healed. You were called to heal from where you still limp. And that limp, it's not your shame. It's your signpost that you survived, that you're real, that you're safe. You don't have to fake the finish line when people need someone who still remembers the valley. You don't have to polish the pain when someone else is drowning and doesn't need a sermon. They need a hand. This is what makes you different. You don't minister from the mountaintop. You minister from the middle, the in-between place, where breakthrough hasn't shouted yet, but God still speaks in whispers. Your limp isn't proof you're failing. It's proof you're still walking, still trusting, still showing up with just enough grace to keep moving. And that's more powerful than 1,000 messages from people who forgot what it felt like to bleed quietly. You're not pretending anymore. You're not posturing. You're showing your scars without needing to explain them. You're letting your limp lead others into freedom because they see you and realize, if she can still move like that, maybe I don't have to wait until I'm perfect to begin again. You're not healed yet, but you're holy anyway. You're not whole yet, but you're willing. And heaven honors the ones who don't wait to be perfect. They just show up broken and burning, because fire flows through fractures and oil drips from wounds. And the most anointed voices are often the ones still learning how to speak without trembling. You weren't called to impress. You were called to impact. And the deepest impact never comes from the ones who finished the race untouched. It comes from the ones who crawled when they had to, but never stopped loving, never stopped showing up, never stopped believing that God could still use them, even if they bled while doing it. Your limp is not your liability. It's your language. And every step you take says to someone behind you, you can come even like this. You weren't called to look healed. You were called to heal others from the place you still limp. And because of that, your walk is holy. Your wounds are sacred. And your journey is someone else's rescue map. Episode 8. You're not carrying leftovers. You're carrying left behind glory. It didn't look like much. What you had in your hands. After the movement moved on, after the revival wrapped, after the crowd left, you looked around at the quiet, the empty chairs, the cool fire, and whispered to yourself, maybe I stayed too long. But heaven leaned in and said, no, you stayed just long enough to carry what they left behind. Because when the masses moved on, chasing the next big thing, you lingered, not out of fear, but out of faithfulness. And what you caught wasn't scraps. It was glory, the kind that settles after the noise, the kind that doesn't fall in the fire, but in the stillness afterward. You're not holding what was left behind. You're holding what heaven reserved for the ones who didn't rush out. When the lights dimmed, others took the photos. You took the presents. Others took the memory. You took the mantle. Others took credit. You took responsibility. Because some glory only comes in the after the crowd, after the closing prayer, after the excitement fades, and only the true hearts remain. You didn't stay because you had nothing else. You stayed because you knew he wasn't done. You stayed because you felt something, still hovering in the room. A weight, a whisper, a call that said, wait with me. Don't rush what's still holy. And now you carry it. That glory that doesn't need to announce itself. That presence that doesn't perform. That weight that doesn't entertain, but transforms. You're not carrying leftovers. You're carrying left behind glory. And the difference? Leftovers fill the stomach. Glory marks the soul. Leftovers fade by morning. Glory lingers for generations. This is the inheritance of the remnant, not what was handed out, but what was hidden for the faithful. The kind of glory that walks quietly with you into everyday places and makes people weep without knowing why. The kind that rests on your words, your silence, your very presence, and says, this one stayed. This one waited. This one didn't leave the garden. Before the dew fell, you thought you had nothing, but you're carrying what heaven couldn't give to the ones in a hurry. And that makes you not the forgotten, but the entrusted. You're not carrying leftovers. You're carrying left behind glory. And in this hour, that's what the earth is starving for. Something real, something holy, something worth staying for. Episode 9, you're not delayed. You're descending with depth. They ran ahead. Their names flashed. Their voices rose. Their platforms stretched like towers. And you? You found yourself moving in the opposite direction. Not up, but inward. Not faster, but further down. And you questioned it. Why does it feel like I'm falling behind, while everyone else is being seen? But heaven whispers, you're not delayed. You're descending with depth, and depth takes time. You were never meant to rise too quickly, because what you carry requires roots, not just reach. This isn't failure. It's formation. This isn't stagnation. It's sacred descent, down past the surface, of performance, of applause, of comparison, down where the presence lives, where the silence thickens, where the oil is pressed, not poured. They may fly higher, but you're learning to anchor deeper. They may be seen now, but you're being shaped forever, because elevation without depth collapses in time. But the ones who descended, they carry weight that doesn't shake. When storms scream, you're not behind. You're becoming someone the earth can't move. You're letting God build from the bottom. Foundation first. Faith first. Depth first. You're not lost in delay. You're buried in design. And design doesn't rush. It chisels. It carves. It slows down to listen for the eternal, while others run for the moment. This is the way of the remnant. We go deep, so we can carry what survives. We go hidden, so we can hold what holy. Let them call it delay. Let them call it obscurity. You call it obedience. Because if he's going down with you, it's not descent, it's invitation. Into the quiet, into the weight, into the sacred soil, where truth takes root, and glory grows slow. And when you rise, and you will rise, you won't rise with noise. You'll rise with substance, with a voice forged in silence, with a spirit that doesn't shake, because it was built beneath the surface. You're not delayed. You're descending with depth, and depth is heaven's way of preparing someone who won't collapse under the weight of what's coming next. Episode 10. You're not meant to return the same. You're rising with remnant fire. You didn't go into the wilderness to come back looking clean. You didn't descend just to reemerge with good language and polished faith. No, you went in to burn, to be refined, to be undone, to be rebuilt with glory only fire can leave behind. And now, you're not coming back the same. You're rising with remnant fire. And fire changes everything. They thought you disappeared. You were just igniting in silence. They thought you missed a moment. You were being lit from within. They thought you had nothing left. But now you carry the kind of flame that doesn't flicker with wind. It commands the atmosphere. You don't walk like you used to. There's weight in your step now. You don't speak like before. There's smoke in your breath and power in your pause. You don't come back for attention. You come back as ignition for hearts grown cold. for churches grown stale, for families, cities, systems, waiting on something real. And that something is you burning. This is what the remnant carries. Not leftover energy, but preserved flame. Not hype, but holy combustion. You can survive the dark, to play it safe in the light. You're not returning to blend in. You're returning to set things ablaze. And not with noise, but with knowing. The kind of knowing that comes only from fire, only from tears, only from years. No one else saw. Now you carry what can't be taught, what can't be bought, what only fire can deposit. In those who don't run, when the heat rises, you're not the same. Your smoke-wrapped obedience, your truth-made flame, your presence that pierces, your witness and wildfire in one body. And this world, it doesn't need another voice. That sounds like everything else. It needs a torch. It needs someone who can walk in quietly and shift the whole atmosphere without saying a word. That's you, because you didn't just survive. You kindled something sacred. You didn't just wait. You worshipped in ashes. You didn't just return. You rose with fire, and fire always finds what needs to be awakened. So don't apologize for being different. Don't dim it down for their comfort. You were forged to walk back in with the kind of burn that reminds a room who God really is. You're not meant to return the same. You're rising with remnant fire, and what you touch now won't just feel warmth. It will feel God.